Hi. So you can't see the amazing group of women who are in the room with me, but actually we are doing a live broadcast of my shiur with an amazing group of young women who are learning with us at Nishmat in Yerushalayim this year in our Liba program. So we're just going to give a little clap for our Liba students. Woo! They're sitting on the side. So we're very grateful to all of you for joining. So even as on the home front, we are doing our very best to live our lives very fully, unhampered, which is exactly what our soldiers are protecting. They are protecting our ability to live full, unhampered lives here in Yerushalayim and, quite frankly, all over the world. We are also defying the terrorists by living in what here in Israel we call shigrat chirum, which is it is a time for routine during an emergency. And yeah, even with all that we've been managing to do during this time, it can be sometimes difficult to get our kavanah correct when it comes to Tehillim, specifically Tehillim that are of praise. What do we do if we're in a Tehillim group and the Tehillim that were left for us in the group were, I don't know, the prakim of Hallel, right? What if they were the prakim of just pure praise? How do we say that during this difficult time? And as we head into Chanukah, where again, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will be saying Hallel. And we will also be saying an extra parak of Tehillim, which is Mizmor Shir Chanukah Habayit LeDavid, which overall is a parak of praise. How do we do that? How do we do that in a time where, on the one hand, we are defying the terrorists and we are living our lives despite their attempts to have us do otherwise? How do we do that? How do we have kavanah for our prakim of Tehillim? Now, we know that Mizmor Shir Chanukah Habayit LeDavid is a parak that we say every single day. We say it before Psukei de Zimra. And I want to take a look at this parak, which again is set aside for Chanukah, but also we say every day. And I want to together set our intentions for what we're living through right now, what this parak in particular has to give us right now. And I hope you will join me in seeing just how uniquely suited this parak is for the specific Sarah, 8 Sarah that we are in right now. And that is after, at first glance, and I'm going to share a source sheet with everybody. I can find my source sheet. Oh, do you think I can find my source sheet? Amazing. Okay. I hope you're able to see my source sheet. So as we look at the source number 5, and hopefully my source sheet will be shared in the chat as well, we see that the second pasuk of Tehillim Perek Lamed is Arumimcha Hashem ki dilitani. I shall exalt you, Hashem. You have pulled me up from the depths. V'lo simachta oivai li. And you did not let my enemies have joy over me. And quite honestly, Simchat Torah did not feel that way. That we know for sure. So it can be very difficult to read a pasuk like that right now, when even as we're seeing amazing success of our soldiers, Baruch Hashem, in wiping out evil from this world. At the same time, it's not a time of overt simcha. It's a time of high morale, but we have a lot to mourn for. So how do we say a pasuk like this? How do we have intention? So let's back up. Why is this parak? Why do we say it every day? And why was it chosen for Chanukah? So if you take a look at source number 1, you'll see a source that actually you're probably used to. We say it on Shabbat. We talk about the different shir shel yom of every single day of the week. The shir shehaleviim hayu omrim b'veit hamikdash, and it says what we say on Yom Rishon and Yom Sheni, and those we're familiar with because actually it seems to be the actual prakim that we Bazman Hazeh say. When you go to Halacha Gimel, this is in Masechtot Ktanot, Masechet Sofrim. So Halacha Bet is what we know, we're used to, we say it on Shabbat. Halacha Gimel opens up with the fact that on Chanukah we say Arumimcha Hashem, which is this Perek Lamed of Tehillim. Then it goes on and it lists that on Purim we say a parak called Shigayon LeDavid. And what's very interesting, and we're not going to get into it now, but it's an interesting discussion of That's so interesting. This, right, we know that Halacha Bet stuck. The actual Pirkei Tehillim that are set for the Shir Shel Yom are the ones that we do every day. But when it comes to Halacha Gimel, we say Aromim Hashem for Chanukah, but the other ones listed are not necessarily, they didn't stick, but the Chanukah one did. And if you look at source number 2, we see yet another source for why this parak of Tehillim is said on Chanukah. And we say, Mizmor Shir Chanukat, so says the Midrash, Mizmor, this is Midrash Tehillim, Mizmor al Bayit Rishon B'Yamei Shlomo. So that first, the first 3 psukim, so the first 3 words of the first pasuk are a reference to Bayit Rishon. Shir al Shir, the word Shir tells us al Bayit Binyan Bayit Sheni B'Yamei Ezra. Like this parak of Tehillim was prophetic in its reference to many different moments of history. And then Aromimcha Hashem ki dilitani, what does that section of the pasuk reference? Migalut Bavel. And then it quotes a pasuk from Shmot. And then Velo simachta oivai b'madai uparas. That's referencing the Purim story when our enemies who wanted to completely obliterate us did not succeed at doing so. And then Hashem Elokai Shiv'ati Elecha, again, another verse from this parak of Tehillim, Begalut Yavan, Vatir Pa'eni, who sent us healing. How did we get healed? Al Yedei Chashmonai Uvanav. Now we see another parak of Tehillim, which says, yes, this parak, another reference that this parak is very important, specifically for the Chanukah story. Tani Miyar Dibor, in other words, in the time of Yavan, they wanted to tell us we couldn't keep any of our mitzvot. They wanted us to not succeed. It's very interesting because, as we'll see, the parak of Tehillim does not actually specify a specific historical event. Most Pirkei Tehillim, some do, but most do not actually reference a very specific historical event. But we're seeing that this parak of Tehillim is saying, oh, we can point to lots of historical events where we were saved from different tragedies and different atrocities. And we're seeing just how much this Midrash Tehillim is connecting this parak specifically to the Chanukah story. Zamru Lashem Chasidav, again, another phrase from this parak, Elu b'nei Matityahu, the Chasidim, the ones who saved us, these were the b'nei Matityahu. So we see very early references to the idea that the Chanukah story is expressed through this parak of Tehillim. Now we will see, and perhaps you're very familiar with this parak, because again, we do say it every single day, that it is actually interesting because it's in first person, right? Let's take a look at the parak together. So we're in source number 5. Okay, it opens up, Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid, Aromimcha Hashem ki dilitani v'lo simachta oivai. Again, we said that pasuk already. I will exalt you, Hashem. You pulled me up. You didn't let my enemies have happiness over me. Hashem Elokai Shivati Elecha V'tirpe'eni. I called out to you. You healed me. Hashem Ha'elita min Sha'ol Nafshi. You pulled me out of the depths. Hashem Chitani miyar dibor. You brought me back to life from being down in the depths in a pit. Let's see how significant that is. And then we have a new section. That's why I made a new. I put a new section on the page. Zamru LaHashem Chasidav. Again, so it's interesting. The first 3 psukim are focused on an individual, first person, sharing their first person experience, talking directly to Hashem, right? In second person. Hashem is in second person. And now in Pasuk Hey, Zamru LaHashem Chasidav V'hodu L'zecher Kodsho, there is a turning to the Chasidim, which again, the Midrash said, that's the Bnei Matityahu, but now it's the job of the Chasidim to praise Hashem. And why? What is the reason? Ki rega be'apo, right? In a moment, there's a moment in Hashem's wrath. Chayim b'rtzono. We know that Chayim, our life, is up to God. It's His ratzon, His will that decides whether we get life. Ba'erev yalin bechi. At night, I went to sleep crying because, again, kind of parallel to ki rega be'apo, there was this moment of wrath. There was this moment of distress that we were in. V'labokerina. But already in the morning, we're facing salvation. So we have a description of an Eitzara. And by the end of the pasuk, again, similar to I called to you, you healed me, you pulled me out of a pit, you pulled me out. Again, I was in distress, but guess what? When it came down to it, It was distress that took but a morning, but a night. By the morning, all was okay. Again, 6 weeks into the hardest existential threat that we've had since 1973, since the Yom Kippur War, these sometimes, I want to give space for us to express that sometimes it's very hard to read these and say, really? You know, like in the morning, we're already out of distress. I'm not feeling that way right now. I want to give us space to feel that for a moment, that it's hard sometimes to read some of these psukim. Then we have a new section. Why? Because as opposed to the other psukim, which were talking already from a sense of salvation, we go for a few psukim from Pasuk Zayin through Pasuk Yud Aleph into a little bit more of the distress. Now, there's a whole discussion of, so are these psukim, is this like a sandwich where you have praise of Hashem, and then you have Hashem, I'm in distress, and then you again end with praise of Hashem? Or is the middle section more of a retrospective? Now, the reason that I bring that up is that if you compare it to different Mizmorei Tehillim, for example, if you look at Perek Chaf Zayin, which is the Perek that we say during Elul through Shmini Atzeret, right? LeDavid Hashem Orivi Shi Mimi Ira. That is a very unique Perek because it opens up and it's talking complete praise of Hashem. Hashem, you're amazing. I'm not afraid. But it's actually talking in third person, right? He's talking and describing David HaMelech, who's describing how much he trusts in Hashem, but he's talking in third person. And then in the middle of the perek, you feel like, hold on, did we just go to a whole new perek? Because suddenly he yells out, like, Shema Hashem, kol li ekra v'chaneni ve'aneni, lecha amar li bibakshu panayach et panecha Hashem avalkesh, which becomes second person, but he's no longer feeling as stable and calm and good as he did in the first half. He's now in distress and expressing it, and it gets back and stabilizes into calm, right? So at first glance, you say, oh, something similar is happening here. There's a description of everything's good. Then we fall in Pasuk Zayin into actually things are not so good. Let's look specifically how this appears here. Take a look at Pasuk Zayin. Va'ani amarti b'shalvi bal emot leolam. I said in my calm, I will never falter. That's what I said. But then what happened? Hashem birtzoncha hamadata lahari'oz histarta panecha hayiti nivhal. I understand this is a very unique phrase, this hamadata lahari'oz. You Hashem, we know that your strength is like a mountain, right? We know that generally we need your strength of a mountain. And when you're not there, when we don't have your mountain strength, histarta panecha, when you have hidden your face from us, hayiti nibhal, I'm a mess. I'm falling apart. Elecha Hashem ekra, ve'el Hashem etchanan. In other words, and then I'm calling out to you. And notice we're back into second person, okay? I'm calling out to you. I'm pleading with you. Ma betza b'dami. What purpose is there to my blood? Beriditi al shachat. What's the point of me going to my grave? Hayodcha afar. Am I gonna, praise you to the dirt? Hayagid amitecha. Can I tell your truth when I'm in the ground, when I'm dead? No. So keep me here in this world. Shema Hashem v'chaneni. Hashem hayeh ozer li. Please Hashem, answer me. Give me compassion. Be a help to me. So those psukim are really from the depths. And then in Pasuk Yud Bet, new section, suddenly everything's okay again. Hafachta mispedi lemacholi, pitachta saki v'te'azreni simcha. You turned my mourning into joy. You took off my sackcloth. You gave me simcha, as opposed to the oivim who are having the simcha at the beginning. Leman yezamercha chavod v'lo yidom. Right, I can praise you with dignity. I will not be quiet. Hashem Elokai le'olam odek. I will always praise you. So again, if we're comparing it to Perek Chaf Zayin, where it's very, where at first glance you say, wow, is this a mashup of two different prakim where we open up and we're like, Hashem, you're amazing. I'm not feeling any, I just know Hashem is amazing. Not you're amazing, but Hashem is amazing. And then in the second half, they're in distress, talking directly to Hashem, but in distress. This is different. This is very different because in the beginning of our perek, we already have an indication that it's not just Hashem is amazing, but rather I was in distress and now I'm out of distress. He healed me, which tells us that what's going on from Pasuk Zion, is, oh, I'm going to give you a little indication of what it felt like to be in that distress. I'm going to give you a little retrospective of what it was like to be in that distress. And that's what we have from Pasuk Zion through Pasuk Yud Aleph. And then we close. So again, you see there's a nuance in terms of how it's different from Perek Chaf Zion, but it's a different experience. So now we've done a basic run through of our Perek. And now again, so we want to ask, well, why is this the Chanukah story? Also, because what's interesting here is it's in Lashon Yachid, right? It's not in Lashon Rabim. And why would the Maccabim choose this song, right, this perek, to be their perek of recognition of the Chanukah story if it's Lashon Yachid? Now, I don't have a completely perfect answer for it, but it's interesting. If you read in Rav Samet, he has a wonderful book on Tehillim. We'll have a few quotes from it on our source sheet. Rav Samet actually suggests that, like, the fact that the Midrashim indicate this, it's not like, oh, someone later came and, chose this perek and, decided to, like, superimpose which phases of history are connected to this perek. Like, no, it was the Maccabim who chose it. That happened first, like the chicken or the egg question, right? Like, first the Maccabim, this became like their hymn. This became their battle cry. This became like their song of salvation. And then the Midrashim are just reflecting the way in which they had already chose that. Now, Rav Samet goes even farther, which I found very fascinating. And he suggests that some of the other sources, like, for example, take a look. This is a very famous perek. He suggests that the other times when we say this perek, for example, in source number 3, you can see that it's the source that it is the perek that is sung during the Mikra Bikurim. And there's a description of, Agrippas HaMelech taking his basket on his shoulder and coming to the Atara, and the Levim are singing, so Rav Samet is like, well, guess what? This is after the Chanukah story. And the reason that we added in Arumim Hashem is because of the Maccabim, right? And we're saying that at the Bikurim because of the Maccabim. So he's so convinced that this is, the Maccabim perek, that's the way in which he reads that story. Another situation in source number 4, you can see that there's another case in which we say this perek, which is whenever we expand the Atara or expand the city of Yerushalayim, that also gets this perek. I'll leave you to ponder what the meaning of all these different times where Mincha Hashem is. I will also add that there is a suggestion that the reason we say the perek every single day was, once in a while the Sidur develops, maybe because a copyist didn't quite do their work so neatly, right? Maybe really this was the perek which was supposed to be for Chanukah, but accidentally it got also stuck in to be the perek that we say every day, because there's not actually a source that says, "Ooh, say this before Psukei de Zimra." It could be that it was added in really from Chanukah. First, it started being said for Chanukah, and then it became something that we end up saying every single day because of its significance for Chanukah. Okay, now let's try to get into the nitty-gritty of why it would be so significant for Chanukah. Okay. So, what I want to do is talk a little bit about Pasuk Zion, because I think everything pivots on Pasuk Zion, and I want to say that during this time, when I went and I read through this perek last week, when I was like trying to get grounded during this time, I said, oh my goodness, this is the pasuk on which everything turns, right? Va'ani amarti b'shalvi ba'lemot le'olam. And I was reading through Rav Samet, and Rav Samet in source number 6, You can take a look. I brought it because his words are so beautiful. I felt like I had to bring them and not just quote them and not just paraphrase. He says, Mashma'ut dvarav hi. The meaning of this is, B'terem bo hatzara. Before the distress happened, shahayiti netun b'shalva. When life was good, when it was Sukkot, and it was glorious weather, and we were going on family Tehillim, and we went to the Kotel, and I want to say that this was in context of, we were just very, very blessed to hear from Rabbi Leo D, Rabbi D's wife, Lucy, Hashem Yikom Dama, and daughters Maya and Rina, Hashem Yikom Daman, good friends of ours. And that was Pesach for us, right? Again, Halal on Pesach at first was very hard in context of that massive, massive loss. And yet we said on Sukkot, we are living. We're going to be in this moment and we're going to have amazing family time. And it was just an amazing Sukkot. And this was, right? Vani amarti b'shalvi balemot leolam, going on. Lo taliti et shalvati b'chesed Hashemini. Maybe I didn't realize, maybe I didn't know or think or really acknowledge that in the moments of calm, in the moments of peace, that's from Hashem. I thought that's the default. Magia li, to have normal, calm life. That's what Hashem owes me. Hashem owes me a normal, calm life. V'sha'al shalvati chal chok ha'atmada. That's what should be the chok ha'atmada, like the default. That's what the default should be. Umemela balamot leolam. Now, when I first read this in Rav Samet, I was like, really? Come on, I'm Hashem. I believe in Hashem in the good. I believe in Hashem in the bad. I say Baruch Dayan Emet, but I'm looking at Hashem and I'm seeing him everywhere. When I was reading and realizing just my level of spiritual distress during this time, and I read it and I said, hold on, no, I'm struggling right here. I'm struggling right here because I'm upset with Hashem. And I'm saying, Hashem, why is it that you can't make it that we can recognize you fully in the moments of good, in the moments of positive, in the moments of great? And I had this recognition in myself that, oh my goodness, ani amarti b'shalvi balamot leolam. I thought this was the default. And he goes on and he says, this is where we have personal rebuke. And this is a similar sentiment said by the Rasha in Perek Yud of Tehillim. Amar belibo balamot. The Rasha thinks he won't falter. Lidor v'dor asher lo v'raf. Like, ooh, that's very harsh to read. I mean, I'm not saying that we should, chas v'shalom, that we should say that we're Rishayim if we think that way. God forbid. Wide chasm. But to have this recognition of, I really thought that should be the default, and I'm upset with Hashem that it's not. Again, I can still be upset with Hashem, but ultimately he runs the world. And it is coming from this place of, Hashem, the mystical tradition talks about the way in which Hashem contracted himself from this world and therefore gave man the capability, right, of the illusion that he runs things, that he's in charge of things. If you didn't catch Dayan Zobin's shir last night, go catch it when we post all of the recordings, because he talks about this beautifully. He talks about that this is actually the Greek issue. The Greeks brought into the world the concept that like man's creativity can conquer all, right? We're fine. And this pasuk of Vani Amarti Bishalvi Balamot Leolam is coming to go against that. And Rav Samet goes on and he says that that when the distress comes, that's when we most feel and most acutely suddenly are like, oh, when life was amazing, when life was great, when all was calm, that was from Hashem. And maybe I didn't get that. Maybe I didn't really process the level to which every moment of Yitzivut is also from Hashem. Now, Rav Samet brings this up as well in source 7, which I bring here as well. I just kept feeling like I had to quote Rav Samet because I just think he says it so well, but I'll leave that for you to look at on your own. Now, let's move on to Pasuk Yud, right? If we remind ourselves, Pasuk Yud, which I think you can still see on the source sheet on the screen, on the share, right? Ma betza bidami beridati al shachat, hayodcha afar, hayagid amitecha. Okay, what purpose is there in my blood, in me, in my going down to the grave? What good can I do for you, Hashem, there? Can I share your greatness in the grave? Can I share your truth? No, so please keep me in this world. Now, you can see that I like to do a little bit of an eclectic sources, and Robert Alter has a very, very interesting book, right? Translation and commentary on the book of Tehillim. And on this pasuk, he says something that just stopped me in my tracks, right? What profit in my blood, in my going down deathward? Here the poet sounds with powerful compactness the recurrent theme shared by the Psalms of thanksgiving and supplication. Man cannot fulfill his vocation of celebrating God if he is engulfed by death. It is living human beings whom God needs to sing his praises. It looks as though the giving of praise, it looks as though the giving of praise to God is imagined as a replacement of the pagan idea in which the sacrifices were thought of as food necessary to the gods. Now, this stopped me in my tracks, because here we are. This is exactly also where we are in this time. We, Am Yisrael, we stand for v'chai bahem. We stand for life. We stand for doing all we can to live an embodied experience in this world. Mind, body, soul, here, right now. I guess I'm plugging all the different shiurim. Go take a listen to Yoetzet Halacha, Dr. Jordana Top, who goes through the halachot of Kiddush Hashem. We have a concept of Kiddush Hashem. We do. But we, as Jews, our job is to stay in this world. And when Robert Alter talks about how this is actually an idea that was found, that this is actually coming as perhaps a polemic against the pagan idea. In other words, the pagan idea thought you needed human sacrifice, whereas the Jewish idea is absolutely, that's anathema. We learn through Akedat Yitzchak that is completely not what Hashem wants. Hashem expects us to do all we can to stay in this world. Yes, there are moments for which we have to give our lives, and as I heard recently, the moments for which we are to give our lives in Yiddishkeit are the moments for which we're really supposed to live our lives. That is the ideal, is that we're supposed to live our lives for those mitzvot and those values. But this is what we're fighting, the nihilism. Now, again, in reference to Diane Zobin's shir, so he talked about how, in the absence of the switch from Bayit Rishon, where we lost the drive for Avodah Zarah, and we also lost Nevuah, right? And therefore we moved into a new period of time and a new relationship with Hashem, where we're more able to, that tzimtzum of thinking that we run everything, right? The Greek idea that we can just run everything. But he also, was suggesting that nowadays, with that went the entire approach toward paganism. It was replaced by atheism. But what I think we could argue is that what we're seeing here, and Rabbi Sachs talks about this in his book, Not in God's Name, is that Islamic fundamentalism is perhaps, right, is dualism. It is a form of paganism. It is a form of thinking that we're supposed to disconnect body and soul, and that our bodies don't belong in this world, and therefore there's nothing higher to do than to kill people and die, right, in a suicide. It's a death cult. It's a death cult. And ma betza b'dami v'ridati al shachat. This is our cry out to Hashem right now, which is, we know where we're standing. We know where we need to be, which is v'chai bahem. We need to be in this world shouting praises of Hashem, bringing an awareness of Hashem to the entire universe. That's our job. That's why we're here. And it stands in direct opposition. And therefore, what is going on right now is nothing less than a clash of civilizations, but it's a clash between good and evil. And this pasuk really brings that home. And in the words of Rav Samit, he says, Mikevan, in source number 9, Shehaza'azua shechava be'et sheHashem histir panav mimenu. The horror that we experienced when Hashem hid his face from us, hayiti nivhal, we were shocked. Oh my gosh, we were like completely, let's all think back to how we were functioning or really not functioning in the aftermath of Simchat Torah, right? Hayiti nivhal, from the hester panim. נתפס לו כעונש חינוכי שנועד לפקוח את עיניו לכך שרצון Hashem hu שנתן לו שלווה בעבר. Again, this is the idea that he keeps repeating, that it's Ratzon Hashem that gives this shalva, but therefore now let's connect that to mabetza b'dami, harei moto lo yavi kol to'elet. So Hashem, if you take us from this world, what have we learned from this terrible lesson you're making us learn, but this necessary lesson? וכי תוכל תפיסתו החדשה שעליו להודות להשם תמיד על חייו להתבטא לאחר מותו. We get it. You put us through boot camp, Hashem. We get it. We need to be understanding that our moments of amazingness and our moments even of not amazingness, of just calm and pure and just status quo, that each moment is a chesed from Hashem. Well, if you put us in the grave, we're not going to be able to share that with the world, and we're ready to share that with the world. We're ready to get that out there in an unprecedented way. If I'm done here, I can't praise Hashem, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I'm ready to do. And I think that's what we've seen our nation ready to do over the last 6 weeks. We're going to praise Hashem. We're going to praise Hashem. We're going to be able to say a parak of Tehillim that is praise of Hashem, even during this distress, because we're here to praise Hashem. We're here to show that the Ratzon Hashem and the Chesed of Hashem animates every single moment of this world. And I just brought the same idea from Dot Mikra, because I guess I kept saying, oh, it's everywhere. Everyone keeps bringing this concept, she'ikar teshukato shel hamitpalel lechayim, hu hi lema'an yodeh laHashem v'yisaper niflotav. This is why I want to be here. We want to be here to praise Hashem. Now, let's do a little forensics. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this phrase of mabetza b'dami b'ridati el shachat. I could turn to my students and say, do you guys recognize, but it's very strange to be staring at the camera, but turning to my students, right? The phrase mabetza. Where is mabetza from? Mabetza is from the story of Yehuda and Yosef. In the awful story that we will read on Chanukah in my bat mitzvah parsha of Parshat Vayeshev, we read of Yehuda saving Yosef from death, right? The brothers say, Va'ata lechu v'nahargehu v'nashlicheu b'achad haborot. We're going to kill Yosef. We're going to throw him in one of the pits. Notice that I bolded the word borot, and the reason that I bolded the word borot is because of the imagery, right? This is intertextual dialogue. The Perek Lamed of Tehillim is talking back with Perek Lamed Zayin of Breishi, right? That in the beginning of the Perek, where it says, right, this concept of dilitani, drawing up from the depths, and it says, chitani mi yordi bor, you pulled me up from a pit. So again, here we have Yosef being thrown into a pit. The brothers' thought is, great, that will be sure death. And Reuven saves him first and says, no, we're not going to kill. Let's not have him killed by a. Let's just put him in this pit, perhaps momentarily. That's the whole machloket between Rashi and Rashbam. Did he intend to just calm them down and go back and get him? And then by the time he got back, it was too late. But then what does Yehuda say? Vayomer Yehuda lechav ma betza ki naharog et achinu v'chisinu et damo. Okay, again, these words that just are lifted into Perek Lamed. Okay, so what purpose, what profit? The word betza really means profit, right? What profit do we have if we kill our brother and we cover over his blood, and therefore he hatches the plan to sell him to the Ishmaelim? We are not going to murder. There will not be murder here today. Now, on the one hand, he saves Yosef, and on the other hand, the aftermath in the beginning of Perek Lamed Chet, we have Vayihi ba'et hahi
Vayered Yehuda me'etz achav. Yehuda does his downward motion. He's going down into the pit as well. And says Rashi on this concept, and that's when the story of Yehuda and Tamar happens, but says Rashi, Lama nismecha parsha zu lakan, what is the juxtaposition between the story of Yehuda and Tamar, which maybe chronologically didn't happen here, but is being put here intentionally, Hifsik b'parshato shel Yosef, it seems to be smack in the middle of the flow of the Yosef story. It could have happened earlier. We don't know when it happened. There's another Yerida that happens here, and that's that the brothers demote Yehuda from his leadership role when they saw that their father was in distress. Amru, ata amarta lemachro. You told us to sell him. Ilu amarta lahashivo, haynu shomim lecha. But had you told us to bring him back, we would have listened to you. So a little, you could say it's a little unfair because, they also shouldn't have had the thought to kill their brother to begin with. But we see here this idea of going down into pits. We also see here, again, a message for our time, which is we have Sinat Achim in this story. So when we're reading Mizmor Shir Chanukah Habayit LeDavid, and we know that we're in a time where we are fixing that Sinat Achim, and we are working toward that Ahavat Chinam that we need, that we absolutely existentially require in order to continue in this world. So we know that this phrase is a reference to this parak, which is painful because we see Sinat Achim. And so, and we see that puts us in pits, right? That puts us down in the ground. There's an amazing Rav Kook on this piece where he talks about how no, Yehuda was doing this very intentionally. He wanted him going down to Mitzrayim because he understood that Yosef had a very different life approach, worldview. He was more of like the modern Orthodox brother who believed in engaging in the world, and he was the maybe more Haredi brother who believed in a more pure approach. And we were had to separate them out in order to test out the Yosef approach and test out the Yehuda approach and the Chanukah story. We have the zealots. We have the Kohanim coming and trying to, to get that calibration between Yehuda and Yosef, right? It's an amazing ma'amar of Rav Kook, which again, when you read Ma'betza b'dami v'ridati al shachat, you can think of Yosef and Yehuda, and you can think of the Sinat Achim, and you can think of what am I doing? What am I doing to fix that Sinat Achim during this time? I want to get back to one of the initial questions that we brought up, which is how do we recite these Pirkei Tehillim of praise during this time? And I think we think we've already suggested a piece of it, which is, oh my goodness, we have to acknowledge the extent to which every moment of life needs to be praise of Hashem. We need to be able to acknowledge his existence as the way in which he animates every single moment of this world. But I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction before we close, which is, so there's an interesting Gemara in Shabbat. We have a juxtaposition between two statements of Rav Natan bar Miniyumi in the name of Rav Tanchum, okay? Not someone who comes up. I think maybe this is where we get his comments in Shas, okay? It's not like he shows up. It's not Abaye, it's not Rava. He doesn't show up on every page. Okay, so source number 13, which probably would help if I scrolled you to source number 13, and I apologize for not scrolling down as we were doing that Rashi. Oh, sorry, there's one more piece that I didn't bring. Now that I scroll down, I see that I also brought this concept of Vayaker Yehuda, Vayomer Tzadka Mimeni. David Hamelech, author of Tehillim, the connection, right, his ability to say when Natan Hanavi connects the dots for him and shows him just how much he was in the wrong in terms of the fate with Bathsheba. So we know that he is also connecting back to Yehuda and the ability to very immediately acknowledge fault. And again, when we're saying Ma'betza and we're connecting to this story, our ability to also remember that these two figures in history are who we need to have with us right now, guiding us in terms of how we fix the rift within Am Yisrael, to be able to look and say, here's where I need to do better. Here's where I wasn't right to you. Okay, So now on to the Gemara. So Amar Rav Kahana, Darash Rav Natan Bar Miniyumi Mishmeid Rabbi Tanchum, Ner Shel Chanukah, Shehinicha Lamala Me'asrim Ama Psula Kesuka Uchemavoy. So we can't have, and Rabbi Hagen referred to discuss this last night in Hershir, so go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. But the Ner Shel Chanukah that is too high up, if it's more than Esrim Ama, 20 Amot high, then that is disqualified. Similarly, you can't have Schach that's too high up, and with the laws of Eruv, you can't have things that are too high up. Okay, that's one statement of Rabbi Natan Bar Miniyumi in the name of Rabbi Tanchum. And then the Gemara goes on and says, Ve'amar Rav Kahana Darash Rav Natan Bar Miniyumi Nishmeid Rav Tanchum, my dichtiv v'habor reik ein bo mayim. Back to our Yosef story. Why does it say the pit was empty? It didn't have water when it could have just said v'habor reik or ein bo mayim, but not this repetition. Mimashma shneamar v'habor reik ein yodea she'ein bo mayim. Okay, it said borek. Don't I know that it doesn't have water in it? Elamat Talmud lomar ein bo mayim. What does it mean? There's no water in it. Mayim ein bo. There's no water in it, but aval nechashim va'akravim yesh bo. But there are snakes and scorpions in it. Okay, so we have a juxtaposition of these two ideas, which create a connection again between our Yehuda and Yosef stories read during Chanukah and the concept of Pirsum Hanes. If you take a look back at Rashi on the words psula says Dilo shalta ba'ena. You can't see it. An eye can't see something if it's too high, right? If your Hanukkah candles are too high up, nobody can actually see it. And therefore, you're not fulfilling the purpose of these candles, which is pirsum hanes. Now, let's take a look at the following Meshech Chachma. The Meshech Chachma says as follows: V'habor reik ein bo mayim. Scroll down so I don't have to stop in the middle. Haro'eh makom shena'aseh lo nes mevarech baruch she'asa li nes b'makom hazeh. If you see a place where you had a nes happen to you, a miracle happen to you, there's a special blessing for it, which is blessed is the one, Hashem, who made me a miracle in this place. Hapirush kedivrei Abu Draham. This is, let's explain this the way that Abu Draham did. Daka sheyatsa miderech hateva. The times at which you'd be saying this bracha would only be times where something miraculous happened, something that's beyond nature. So let's talk about a version of this, a variation of Baruch She'asali Nes B'makom Hazeh. That's basically the bracha we make on the Chanukah candles, right? We say Asher Kiddushanu B'mitzotav V'tzivanu Likner Shel Chanukah, and then we say Sa Nisim Lavotenu. He did miracles for our forefathers in those days. He should make them now. In other words, that blessing, says the Abu Draham, is a version of Shasali Nes B'makom Hazeh. And so says the Meshech Chachma, what are we making our bracha on? Well, we're not. We're making it for the supernatural Nes Pachashemen, the oil, that we had enough oil for the 8 days when we really didn't, Shazen Neged Hateva, which is supernatural. V'hinei Ikar Hanes, L'nitzachon Malchut Antiochus. If we're being honest, what was the biggest thing that happened in those days? The biggest thing was we had a military victory. V'Yisrael Kiblu Mlucha 200 Shana. And even having sovereignty for 200 years was a miracle, but it was what the Meshech Chachma is saying in Teva. Uluzikaron sarich l'ha'ir neirot. V'lazeh stagi b'chazutza v'alma. Okay, so for that alone, we would put up candles, but that would be enough just to look at. Lehorot al nes pachashemen sarich dafka ziyehei shalta be'ena. But when we're celebrating the supernatural, which gets a sha'asali nes b'makom hazeh, sha'asanisim lavotenu b'yamim hahem b'zman hazeh, that we need to be able to see, the shalta be'ena, because pirsum hanes, that there are supernatural moments in history, right? What am I trying to say? I just spent an hour saying to you that we need to be able to see Hashem in the moment to moment, right? Hashem renews, the existence of the world at every single moment of history. But what is the Meshech Chachma saying here? Well, actually, it's kind of different, right? There is something different. we need to be able to simultaneously recognize the supernatural, and that requires a different halachic manganon, a different system, right? You need pirsum hanes. People need to be able to see it. That's when you say a bracha. On just the military victory, which was more b'derech hateva, that we would not say a bracha on, and that would not require this level of pirsum hanes. We'd have to light candles, but no one else would necessarily have to see that. Okay, and then if you look in the second paragraph there, V'hinei b'Yosef, Amar Rabbi Tanchuma b'Midrash, sheb'sha'a sheshav Yosef mikvurat aviv. When Yosef came back from burying Yaakov Avinu, shehitzitz babor. There's a midrash that says that he peeked into the pit from which he was saved. U'l'shem shamayim nitkavein levarech baruch she'asali nes b'makom hazeh. He made that bracha of blessed is Hashem who made a miracle for me in this place. V'ikar hanes hu ma she'elu mi'abor. There was something supernatural. The fact that he was saved, the fact that they pulled him out of that pit. Misibot ha'ashgacha naseh l'star al kol Mitzrayim. And then like Hashem made this unbelievable nace where he became the head of all of Mitzrayim. But the bracha, that we only say on something that's supernatural. And that's when, right, again, just getting out of the pit, miraculous, but not super miraculous, not beyond this world. What was beyond this world? Let's go back to the other statement of Rabbi Tanchum. He didn't just survive any pit. He survived a pit that was not only rake, but also ein bo mayim. It was empty. It didn't have water. It had snakes and scorpions. V'haya nes yotzei miteva ha'olam. V'lazeh birech baruch she'asali nes. So the baruch she'asali nes is because of that extra layer. And that's why he says, that's why we have these two statements of Rabbi Tanchum, which is Rabbi Tanchum in the Midrash. See what he does there? That he connects this Yosef story to these other two stories, these two ideas that are juxtaposed in the Gemara in Shabbat. Lahorot shebechanukah u'b'Yosef hanes haya hasibot mehahashgacha nitzachon umulcha. Okay, to tell us that on Chanukah and with Yosef there was amazing natural miracles. Rak shehabracha hita kan al habor shelo yiziku nechashim, but that the bracha on the pit was because the snakes did not hurt him. V'kan al pach hashemen. So you see the parallels in the fact that in both stories we have something natural and we have something supernatural. So again, now we're going to return to our question from the beginning, which is how do we handle the pure praise Tehillim at this time, right? And also how do we handle if the prakim and I have split Tehillim with a bunch of friends, and I've got to say really really praiseful ones every single day. There's actually a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Kuf Yud Chet Amud Bet, which tells us, right, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Yehei Chelki Migomrei Halal B'chol Yom. Rabbi Yossi says, I want to be someone who says Halal every single day. Then the Gemara says, Ini, really? Is that a good idea? V'ha'amar mar hakorei Halal B'chol Yom harei ze mecharei from megadef. Doesn't Mar tell us that if you say Halal every single day, that's blasphemous? Right? So what does that mean? Why would it be blasphemous to say Hallel every single day? So Rashi says that the Nevi'im Harishonim tiknu lomar beprakim l'shevach v'hodaya. Okay, the earlier Nevi'im told us there are certain things we say when supernatural things happen. Kedamrin and Barvei Psachim. There's Gemara in Barvei Psachim about this. But if you're just saying prakim of goodness every single day, all the time, below ita, and not at its right time, you're just like singing a song. You're taking away its meaning. So based on this, might you look and say, oh my goodness, maybe I should be saying those prakim every day. Maybe I'm devaluing them. Maybe I'm not acknowledging the supernatural miracles well enough. But the Gemara then answers and says, no, ki ka'amrina, and what Rabbi Yossi was talking about is the psukei de zimra. There are special psukim that we need to say every single day. Now, Rashi indicates that initially, and it's cool to see how psukei de zimra built up over time, that initially it was the two prakim of Tehillim, Hallelu Hashem min hashamayim, Hallelu Kel B'Kodsho, two prakim, the last two prakim that we say of the Tehillim that we say after Ashrei, and obviously that has changed over time. And so what it's saying is like we must daily acknowledge the way in which Hashem interfaces with us and sustains us at every moment. What is off limits is the prakim, which maybe only talk about the supernatural. If we're too focused on the supernatural, that's also a problem. Then we're devaluing and not seeing the lamala mehateva of the supernatural moments. Now, the Magen Avraham handles this very well. The Magen Avraham is talking about the idea that he's not even talking about saying Tehillim every day at first. He's talking about days on which we don't say Hallel. He says, okay, sorry. He's saying, what about people who say Tehillim every day? What if now this is somebody who says Tehillim every single day, and now it's Rosh Hashanah, a day on which we don't say Hallel. Are they allowed to say the psukim of Hallel? V'nireli kevan she ein omer oto derech shira rak derech tchina ubakasha shari. This, when I saw this, it really impacted me. Why? Because what's he saying? He's saying that you can take a parak of Tehillim that is all praise, and you can say it in a derech tchina ubakasha. You can say it in a way in which you are actually saying it as a request, as a petition to Hashem, rather than as a pure praise. Shari, he says, then that would be permitted. Because he says, there's a minhag to say Tehillim on Yom Kippur, and there are other times in which we say this, and this is not a violation of this Gemara in Shabbat, because again, it depends on what your intention is. And again, this gave me chizuk, because on the one hand, I made peace with this parak of Mizmor Shir, because I saw the way in which the middle, even though it's retrospective, it is seeing there are psukim which are calling out from the depths. So maybe I'll just focus on those psukim during this time where we're calling out from the depths. And then, no, we must. The message of this parak is we need to, even in our moments of depths, even when we feel like we're still in the pit, we need to be able to see that it's the laboker rina, that this will pass, that one day we'll look back and it'll just feel like a blip, even though right now that is not how it feels. But to see that I could also take some of the psukim, which are actually more of a shevach, and say it in a form of petition, that I find incredibly powerful. And so I think we have to be able to separate the prakim, which indicate the super big miracles where we really need to give them their due, right? And Chanukah is about recognizing the supernatural and not just the natural. We also are saying a parak of Tehillim, which the Maccabim chose to point us to the natural, to point us to the ways in which Hashem is in the world in the everyday, and not just in the big miracles. So I think there are really a lot of things that we can get out of this. And I'll add, I think we'll end with two different things. First of all, Rashi on the phrase Zamru Lashem Chasidav, which again we saw the Midrash's Chasidav is the Maccabim. Al ma she'asali ki yicholim atem lechasot bo sheyitiv lachem va'afilu atem shruyim b'tza'ar al tirau. Again, this entire parak is not really only being said from the perspective of someone saved. Says Rashi that even when you're in the depth, even when you feel like you're still in the depth and in the tsa'ar, al tira Yisrael, right? Don't be afraid. You will be taken out of that. And so I think that we can have a much deeper understanding of Aru Mincha Hashem Kizi Litani, right? Of I will exalt you, Hashem. You're pulling me out of the depths. I can't help but think about the way in which our enemies have literally underneath civilians barricaded themselves in the depths in the most sinister and sick way. And we don't live that way. We're not going to live in the tunnels. We're not going to live hidden. That's not how we live. That is not our way. We are going to praise Hashem from the rooftops. I'll end with one more point, one more thing that I think we can really get out of this time, which again, I think it's this ability to have a wider lens perspective. And that has to do with the very fact that we have David HaMelech writing a parak of Tehillim, which is about Chanukah Habayit. Why is that a strange thing for him to do? As we know, David HaMelech is told by Hashem, you had to fight a little too much. You were involved in violence a little too much. Good job. You did the right thing. But Shlomo is going to build the Mikdash. And you might think that David, what would his reaction be to the fact that there would be such a delay to the gratification? You might think he'd be like, oh, all right, fine. My son will do it. But what's his reaction? Amazing. I'm going to write him a parak of Tehillim. I'm going to think so far ahead. I'm going to understand that I am part of an arc of history and that better things are to come and that the things that I'm doing right now are part of a grand vision that is going to keep going to the days of Mashiach. That drives him to write a parak of Tehillim in which he says that and you can see it in what's bolded in source number 20. Here we go. And he's quoting Rabbi Moshe Jikatilia. Ki David hitabel kasher amar lo Natan ki hu lo yivneh habayit l'Hashem. Kasher amar lo ki Shlomo b'no yivneh habayit. Ad az hitazer b'simcha. Then he was filled with happiness, tachat avelo, instead of his mourning. By the way, I think that's important too. He did mourn for a moment. Maybe he allowed himself the space to have that feeling of depression. And then that's it. Ki b'no kamohu, his son is like him. We're ledor bador. The lo yicharpehu oyev. The enemy has not won, despite the mistakes that maybe he made and that David made, which may have led him to not merit it to build the Mikdash. But Be'ezrat Hashem, that's us. We live for the next generation. We're not just living for our generation, and we're watching that with our very eyes right now. So I hope that this gives you some focus, some intention for Mizmor Shir L'Bayit, Chanukah Habayit LeDavid for this time, for this Eitzara that we are in, for all of Hallel that we, Be'ezrat Hashem, will say on Chanukah, and for the daily Tehillim that you've taken on for this Eitzara.